Now we know just a little of what Israel has been fighting as well. And let's hope the Albanese government wakes up to our common threat. Today, the Prime Minister said Iran had organised at least 2 arson attacks on Jewish targets in Australia.
ASIO has now gathered enough credible intelligence to reach a deeply disturbing conclusion that the Iranian government directed at least 2 of these attacks. Iran has sought to disguise its involvement, but ASIO assesses it was behind the attacks on the Lewis Continental Kitchen in Sydney on October 20 last year and the Adass Israel Synagogue in Melbourne on December 6 last year. ASIO assesses it is likely Iran directed further attacks as well. These were extraordinary and dangerous acts of aggression orchestrated by a foreign nation on Australian soil. They were attempts to undermine social cohesion and sow discord in our community. A short time ago, we informed the Iranian ambassador to Australia that he would be expelled. We have suspended operations at our embassy in Tehran, and all our diplomats are now safe in a third country. I can also announce the government will legislate to list Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, as a terrorist organisation.
Now, the head of ASIO said that Iran might be involved in more attacks here as well, and not just the firebombing of the Adass Synagogue in Melbourne and that kosher bakery in Sydney, Lewis's Continental Kitchen. But the Iranian embassy itself was not involved.
The embassy was not involved. No Iranian diplomats here in Australia were involved in this. This was directed by the IRGC through a series of overseas cutouts facilitators to coordinators that found their way to tasking Australians.
This is the first time we have expelled an ambassador since World War II. And this whole plot fits with something they warned about back in January. The some arson attacks here on Jews seemed the work of criminal gangs, Muslim-dominated, leaders overseas often, gangs which could have been paid by a foreign country. There are organisations, mainly Muslim or Middle Eastern ones here, which do seem to have a lot of experience hiring criminal lowlife to burn buildings. In fact, they're already blamed for building scores of buildings, mostly tobacco shops, in Melbourne and Sydney and Brisbane, Perth and Adelaide. Many of these fires are alleged to involve members of local Middle Eastern crime gangs, especially from Victoria, gangs fighting over the illegal tobacco trade in a war that so far had around 200 shops around Australia set on fire, including 131 in Victoria and 14 in Sydney. Now, why such Middle Eastern gangs, whose leaders now often hide out in Muslim countries, might be burning Jewish targets here as well? Who knows? Because they want to, because some other actor, maybe a country, is paying them, knowing that these Australian gangs are dug in well here, know how to torch things and wouldn't mind doing it. In fact, the ASIO boss today seemed to back that.
What I can say is it's a layer cake of cutouts between IRGC and the person or the alleged perpetrators conducting crimes. In between them, they tap into a number of people, agents of IRGC and people that they know in the criminal world, and work through there. So it's a series of chains. There is an organised crime. There is an organised crime element offshore in this. But that's not to suggest organised crime are doing it. They're just using cutouts, including people who are criminal and members of organised crime gangs, to do their bidding or direct their bidding in Australia.
I think it's time we drew a link between what Israel has been up against and what we are too. Iran is the world's biggest sponsor of terrorism through that IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. It backed the Hamas terrorists who attacked Israel on October 7, 2 years ago, and started this war. It also funded the Hezbollah terrorist army, which fired thousands of rockets at Israel. But every time that Israel hit back at Hamas, at Hezbollah, and finally at Iran itself, the Albanese government said, stop, de-escalate, negotiate instead. And negotiate with these guys? And now our government finds that Iran is playing the same deadly game in Australia. But consider its apparent refusal until today to see that the enemies of our civilization and Israel's aren't interested in negotiations and peace. They believe in hating Jews and wiping out Israel and then confronting the rest of the West. And our government then refused to do what it only today has finally done. It refused to list the Revolutionary Guards Corps as a terrorist outfit, despite pleas for 2 years from coalition politicians and Jewish groups. It refused to expel the Iranian ambassador even after he'd posted support for a Hamas leader and said a desirable outcome would be wiping out the Zionist plague out of the Holy Lands of Palestine. So what was this? Did this government seriously think that it could somehow sit out this all-out war on Israel by Iran and its proxies? And another blindness of this government. You look how support of terrorist groups is becoming normalised among the anti-Israel protesters, some of them, among people from the Middle East we've imported in rash numbers. You take that giant anti-Israel protest in the Sydney Harbour Bridge 3 weeks ago. We even saw there a big poster of Iran's supreme leader, and standing right in front of it, Labor politicians including Ed Husic and former Premier Bob Carr. Carr actually posted a photo of himself and the rest of them in front of that poster. And in the protests last weekend, there were again flags of Islamic extremists, including the Hamas terrorist group that Iran funds. One protester even wore a shirt with a picture of the Hamas leader now assassinated. And in the Hobart rally, Adel Youssef, who's a senior lecturer at the University of Tasmania, reportedly told protesters there would be no Hamas if there was no Israeli colonisation. We must support them in their resistance. Yet how blind this government has been to the radicalism now even in our universities. That despite Sydney University academics telling us just 2 days after Hamas slaughtered 1,200 Israelis, oh, we shouldn't criticise it.
We're saying that resistance is justified, and we're here to join our voices to those of everyone else saying that Israel is a terrorist settler state.
I'm not going to stand before you and shed tears over the settlers, the terrified settlers. Free Palestine and glory to the Palestinian resistance.
Israel's battle is ours as well. Does the Albanese government finally get that message?